Human virtues. A human being possesses two types of selves, the human self and the animal self. But the value of a human being is related to his human self and has nothing to do with his animal self. The animal self may be regarded some sort of a parasitic existence or like an uninvited guest, and in reality is the unconscious self. Although a human being is an animal and is obligated to fulfill his animalistic requirements, but he has not been created to live in this world like an animal. Instead, he has been created with the aims and objectives of utilizing and commissioning his animal existence for perfecting his human existence. A human being has some genuine requirements incorporated within his inner existence for the sake of his animal as well as his human existence. Since he is an animal, he requires food, water, clothing, and shelter in order to motivate him from making serious endeavors for their search. Feelings of thirst and hunger have been incorporated within his existence. Similarly, for the sake of continuation of human race, sexual desires and love for female partner have been incorporated within his nature. Since men like to live, and in order to sustain his life, he has no other choice except to take care of means of living required for his animal existence. When he sees food, he feels hungry and desires to eat, and therefore he tells himself, I must arrange food for my own consumption, and whatever obstacles are encountered in this path, I must try to remove them. Of course, these feelings are not bad, because for sustenance of life, one must work, eat, and drink. In Islam, not only this has not been forbidden, on the contrary, it has been recommended and encouraged. But parallel to that, it must be clearly understood that the animal life is preliminary and not the desired goal. Or in other words, the animal self is not the main guest, rather someone accompanying him. Therefore, if someone assigns authenticity to animal existence, strives and endeavors seriously day and night to fulfill his animal lower desires and passions, considers the aims of life simply eating, drinking, sleeping, and reproducing, has indeed fallen into intense darkness of deviation and wanderness, because he has removed the human wisdom and heavenly spirit from the position of power and have confined them in a forgotten place. Such an individual does not deserve to be called as a human being. Rather, he is an animal with a human face. He possesses wisdom, but by his perverted deeds has become so isolated that he can no longer recognize and follow the superior human virtues and characteristics. In spite of having eyes, he is unable to see the realities. In spite of possessing ears, he cannot hear the facts. The Holy Quran considers such an individual as an animal, and even worse and more deviated than the animals, because animals lack wisdom and do not understand, while the above-mentioned person, in spite of having wisdom, does not understand. The Holy Quran describes such individuals as follows: And if they answer thee not, then know that they follow their lusts. And who does go farther astray than he who followeth his lust without guidance from God? Lo, God guideth not wandering folk. Quran, Surah 28, Ayah 50. And further said, Already we have urged unto hell many of the jinn and humankind, having hearts wherewith they understand not, and having eyes wherewith they see not, and having ears wherewith they hear not. These are like the cattle, nay, but they are worse. These are the neglectful. Quran, Surah 7, Ayah 179. The Holy Quran further defines these creatures as follows: Hast thou seen him who maketh his desires his God, and God sendeth him astray purposely, and sealeth up his hearing and his heart, and set on his sight a covering? Then who will lead him after God? Will you not then heed? Quran, Surah 45, Ayah 23. How unfortunate and losers are those who have sacrificed their heavenly self, prosperity, and human perfection for the sake of passions and desires of their animal existence. They have exchanged their human self with their animalistic pleasures. The commander of the faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salam, said, Whoever becomes involved in this world's allurements, thus giving up his gains from his immortal life in the next world, has indeed been cheated. Qarar al-Hukam, Volume 1, page 88. He also said, restrain yourself from indulgence into lower shameful deeds, no matter how attractive or appealing they might appear, because in this exchange or trade you do not receive the genuine value of yourself. Do not allow yourself to be a slave of others when God has created you free. The goodness which cannot be obtained except through evil is not goodness. Also, a thing acquired except with serious efforts would not be easy to retain. Nahjul Balagha, Volume 31, page 401. And said, what a bad trade it is that one exchanges his self for this world instead of trading it with whatever is available with God Almighty in the next. Nahjul Balagha, Sermon 32. But a human being cannot be summarized only into an animal self, because he possesses a human self, and on account of this merit he is an abstract celestial jewel, descended from the heavenly kingdom, cherishing values other than the animalistic desires. If a human being ponders deeply into his inner existence and really recognizes himself, he will discover that he has arrived from the kingdom of power, wonder, knowledge, blessings, and benevolence, illumination, goodness, justice, and in one sentence, from the kingdom of absolute perfection, and is originated and belongs to it. It is here that a human being discovers another perspective and looks beyond the limited boundaries of the created world towards the supreme source of absolute perfection and feels attracted towards his higher values, hence being committed for aspiration for those cherished values. Accordingly, he changes the movement of his self from the animalistic course towards the exalted path of perfection, which ultimately leads him towards the highest spiritual station of God's nearness. When this internal revolution within him occurs, the importance of higher and moral ethical values become explicit. Therefore, if a human being desires values such as knowledge, favor, welfare, sacrifice, justice, benevolence, defense of the deprived and destitute, truth, goodness, and honesty, it is because he considers himself belonging to the world of absolute perfection and regards such virtues worthy of his exalted human position. It is because of these feelings that he admires them to the extent that he is ready to sacrifice his animal self and desires for the sake of those cherished higher virtues. Good morals, etiquette, and ethics are defined as a series of spiritual and meaningful perfection, whose proportion for his own spiritual perfection need is clearly understood by the human celestial soul. The soul admits to himself, I must do these things. The ethical musts are derived from the degree of perfection and nobleness within the self and are utilized for achieving exaltation of essence and spiritual perfection. When he says, I must offer sacrifice on the righteous path, because he understands that sacrifice is useful for achieving the perfection and exaltation of essence, and therefore desires to do that. Similarly, all of them have been created identical as far as their sense for recognition of values and anti-values is concerned. If a human being ponders deep into his own perfection, seeker, pure nature, away from the whims and passions of self, he might discover the moral and ethical virtues as well as the moral vices. All human beings of all times were created such by God Almighty, and if some of them become deprived of this sacred sense of identification, it was because their whims, passions, and intense animalistic desires silenced the light of their wisdom, leaving them like a sole rider in the fields of self-struggle. The Holy Quran about the recognition of virtues and vices by the pure human nature as follows. And a soul and him who perfected it and inspired it what is wrong for it and what is right for it, he is indeed successful who causes it to grow. Quran, Surah 91, Ayah 7-9. The prophets came with the intention of awakening human nature and to charge their unconscious self into a conscious self. They came to help support and guide human beings in recognizing and paying attention to higher moral values and utilizing them for attaining God's nearness. They came to remind human beings about the exalted position and need for safeguarding and motivating the superior human virtues. They came to emphasize the important point that you are not animals, instead you are humans and possess the potential of being superior than the angels. World affairs and animalistic manifestations are far below your exalted celestial dignity, and therefore you should not sell yourself for them. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was asked, "Who is the most exalted and most noble person?" "The one who does not regard the world worthy of greatness of his self," replied the Imam. Tuhaful Uqul, page 285. If man really identifies his true human personality, and if his human self indeed gets upper hand, then good morals and ethics become alive and dominate over the moral vices and rascalities. And when it occurs, a man is no longer permitted to ignore human values and follow vices, for example, ignoring truth and speaking lies, disregarding honesty and practicing treachery, not caring about the honor of the self and indulging into sinful deeds, and ignoring favor and practicing human persecution. The commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, said, "Whoever considers himself honorable will regard selfish passions as low and mean." Najul Balagha, saying 449. The prophets continuously strived for awakening the upright human nature so that they could learn about their jewel of existence and could discover their dependence and link with God Almighty, thus spending everything in their possession for attaining the position of nearness and pleasure of the Lord of the worlds, to the extent that their eating, drinking, sleeping, seeing, speaking, working, living, and dying become sacred and ethical. Truly, when men become God's servants and do not cherish for any other goal except His pleasure, everything becomes ethics, worship, and virtue. The Holy Quran said, "Say, lo, my worship and my sacrifice and my living and my dying are for God, the Lord of the worlds." Quran, Surah 6, Ayah 162. Therefore, because of the above-mentioned reasons, recognition of the self in Islam has been assigned a special importance. The commander of the faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salam, said, "Self-consciousness is one of the most profitable assets of a person," Qarar al-Hukam, page 768, and said, "Whoever succeeds in his self, his affairs will be improved," Qarar al-Hukam, page 628. What is meant with self-recognition is not the particulars of one's identity card. Rather, it means man's realization of his true position within the created world, and understanding that he is not simply an earthly animal, rather is a reflection of heavenly illumination from the celestial kingdom, is the trustee and vigilant of God Almighty upon earth, a celestial being who has been created conscious, empowered, and free, is capable of upward ascent towards the absolute perfection, and his special creation has been assigned the responsibility of nourishment and perfection of the self. It is because of this realization that man feels a sense of greatness and perfection, discovers the sacredness and virtues within his inner existence, and morals and ethics become valuable and meaningful for him. In that case, he gets relief from the feelings of hopelessness, depression, vainness, nonsense, aimless repetitions, and instead life becomes sacred, precious, beautiful, and objective.